April 8, 1943. At 27,000 feet above the skies of occupied France, Oberleutnant Ralph Armachin, his oxygen mask couldn't conceal his smirk as he observed the ungainly silhouettes of American fighters laboriously climbing toward his formation of Fowler-Wolf, 198.5 south. The veteran ace of age of 26 studied the newcomers, making their combat debut over Europe. "Our enemies have sent us flying milk bottles," he transmitted to his wingmen. Laughter barely restrained at the sight of the massive Republic P-47 Thunderbolt struggling to gain altitude. Below, 16P-47C Thunderbolts of the 4th Fighter Group lumbered upward in tight formation. Their twin-row, Pratt and Whitney, or 2,800 double Wasp engines straining under the burden of their 7-ton weight. 2 German pilots, accustomed to sleek Spitfires and nimble Soviet fighters, these corpulent American machines appeared almost comical. Barrel-shaped fuselages topped with greenhouse canopies, wings seemingly too small for their massive bodies, propellers that dwarfed anything in the Luftwaffe inventory. What Hermogen didn't know on what none of the German pilots circling above could have imagined was that they were witnessing the arrival of the weapon that would systematically dismantle the Luftwaffe's fighter arm. Within 18 months, these flying milk bottles would transform from objects of derision into instruments of terror while their 850 CLIBRE Browning machine guns became the most feared sound in German skies. The mathematics of destruction were already built into those broad wings. 3,400 rounds of ammunition, a combined rate of fire of some 6,000 rounds per minute, enough concentrated firepower to slice a Messerschmitt in half in less than 2 seconds. The transformation began that April morning when Major Donald Blay, commanding the 335th Fighter Squadron, spotted the German formation positioning for attack. The former Eagle Squadron veteran, freshly transferred from RAF Spitfires just weeks earlier, understood what his men did not. Survival in the P-47 required abandoning everything they thought they knew about air combat. The Thunderbolt represented a radical departure from conventional fighter design philosophy. While the Germans pursued lightweight interceptors, optimized for climb and turn performance, Republic Aviation had built something unprecedented, a high-altitude juggernaut that leveraged mass, power, and firepower to redefine the rules of aerial warfare. Among the 56 American pilots scattered across that French sky that morning were men who would later become legends, future aces, whose names would strike fear into Luftwaffe hearts. But on April 8, 1943, they were novices in an untested aircraft, facing the most experienced fighter force in the world. The Germans had fought continuously since 1939, with veterans forged in Poland, France, Britain, and Russia. The Americans had fought for exactly 0 days. This story is about how industrial logic trumped tactical brilliance, how quantity and quality merged into overwhelming superiority, and how German laughter turned to terror when they discovered what synchronized Browning machine guns could do to an aircraft at 400 yards. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt had emerged from a June 1940 panic. As German fighters swept across France, Alexander Kartveli, Republic Aviation's Georgian-born chief designer, received urgent specifications from the U.S. Army Air Corps for a high-altitude interceptor capable of matching the Luftwaffe's best. What Kartveli designed instead was a monster that redefined the possible. "It will be a dinosaur," Kartveli admitted to his design team, "but it will be a dinosaur with good proportions." The XP-47B prototype that first flew on May 6, 1941, stunned everyone who saw it. At 9,900 pounds empty, it weighed 65% more than its predecessor, the P-43 Lancer. Its massive turbo-supercharger system, with intricate ducting stretching through the rear fuselage, gave it a bloated, almost pregnant profile. Test pilots approaching it for the first time would often ask the same question. This thing actually flies. Not only did it fly, it flew like nothing else at high altitude. The Pratt & Whitney 2800 double Wasp engine, an 18-cylinder radial, producing 2,000 horsepower, maintained full power at 27,000 feet in altitude where German fighters gasped for breath. The turbo supercharger, powered by exhaust gases, delivered sea-level performance in the stratosphere where traditional superchargers failed. Major Hubert Hubbs MC, commanding the 56th Fighter Group in Bridgeport, Connecticut, initially despised the aircraft. Between September 1942 and January 1943, his unit lost 18 pilots and 41 aircraft in training accidents. The P-47 killed more Americans in training than Germans would in the early months of combat. It ground-looped on landings, torque-rolled on takeoff, and dived so violently that it introduced pilots to compressibility wear. Shockwaves froze control surfaces mid-flight, but for those who mastered it, the P-47 revealed itself as something exceptional. Lieutenant Robert Johnson, an Oklahoma farm boy who would become one of America's top aces with 27 victories, described his first flight. It was like strapping yourself to a locomotive. The power was unbelievable. You didn't fly it, you aimed it. The first combat encounters in April and May 1943 seemed to confirm German prejudice. P-47s couldn't turn with the Focke-Wulf 190 segundos, couldn't climb with the Messerschmitt Bf-109s, and struggled to match their handling at medium altitudes. Luftwaffe pilots quickly adapted, attacking from below and forcing dogfights, where maneuverability outweighed firepower. Hauptmann Joseph Pips Priller, commanding JG-26, reported to headquarters after his first encounter, "The new American fighter is meat for the slaughter. It flies like a truck, turns like a freight train, and climbs like a pregnant cow." German pilots mocked them as Indiana, fat targets pretending to be warriors. Initial statistics backed up German confidence. In their first month, American fighter groups lost 14 Thunderbolts while scoring only 3 confirmed kills. RAF Spitfire pilots watching from nearby squadrons quietly questioned the Americans' choice of aircraft. British flyers joked that the best evasive maneuver in a P-47 was to unstrap and run around the roomy cockpit. But something strange was happening in those early dogfights the German intelligence failed to catch. The P-47s that were shot down had taken staggering amounts of damage before falling. One Thunderbolt returned from a May 4th mission with 21 cannon hits and over 100 machine gun strikes damage that would have obliterated a Messerschmitt or Spitfire. Its massive radial engine, lacking the vulnerable coolant systems of liquid-cooled fighters, simply absorbed the punishment. More importantly, when Thunderbolts hit their targets, the effects were devastating. Its battery of machine guns created a convergence zone of destruction unfamiliar to Luftwaffe pilots. Unlike early warfighters with rifle-caliber guns or cannons with limited ammo, the P-47 could sustain fire for over 30 seconds an eternity in aerial combat. The moment that began to change German perceptions occurred on June 26, 1943. Oberlisieux, France. It involved 2nd LT Robert S. Johnson of the 61st Fighter Squadron in a legendary encounter. Johnson, as formation of 48 P-47s, was returning from escort duty when they were ambushed by 16 Focke-Wulf 190s from 2 JG-26, led by Hauptmann Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland, brother of the famed Adolf Galland. The Germans executed a flawless attack, diving from the sun with superior speed. Johnson, flying at the rear of the formation, was caught in a deadly crossfire and took catastrophic hits in seconds. 20 20mm cannon shells exploded across his airframe. The canopy shattered. Hydraulic fluid sprayed the cockpit. The engine cowling tore away, and a fire started behind the instrument panel. Johnson, wounded in the nose and leg, tried to bail out only to discover the canopy was jammed by a shell that had fused the track. He was trapped at 27,000 feet in a crippled, burning plane. What followed defied every known rule of aerial combat. With no visibility, through an oil-smeared windscreen, an engine shaking violently. In semi-responsive controls, Johnson leveled out and pointed the plane toward England. The Thunderbolt, despite catastrophic damage, held together where any other aircraft would have disintegrated. Then, it got worse. A lone FW-190, flown by an unidentified German pilot from 2 JG-26, intercepted Johnson's crippled fighter, now limping toward the channel at under 170 miles per hour. Historians still debate the pilot's identity. What came next became one of the most extraordinary duels in aerial warfare. The German opened fire from behind 4 20mm cannons and 2 30mm machine guns ripping into the Thunderbolt. Johnson could only crouch behind his armor plate and pray. The P-47 absorbed the entire cannon ammo load. Then the German repositioned and used his remaining machine gun ammunition. The Thunderbolt kept flying. The German pulled alongside, stared at the shattered aircraft, his face shifting from triumph to confusion to awe. He emptied his final rounds, still to no effect. Then, in a moment of silent recognition, the German gave a salute and peeled away out of ammo, and perhaps out of belief. Johnson's P-47 landed at Manston, its engine failing on the runway. The crew chief stopped counting bullet holes after 200. One cannon shell had detonated inches from Johnson's head. Another had exploded behind his seat. The engine had taken direct hits. Control cables were severed. And still, the Thunderbolt brought him home. 3 of the 4 main longerons, the structural backbone of the fuselage, had been shot clean through. Yet somehow, the aircraft had still brought Johnson home. His miraculous survival sent shockwaves through both the American and German air forces. Engineers at Republic Aviation, upon studying the battered wreck, realized they had underestimated their own creation. Meanwhile, German intelligence, receiving reports from pilots of 2 JG-26s, initially dismissed the accounts as exaggerated. No aircraft, they insisted, could withstand that kind of punishment. But testimony from multiple Luftwaffe pilots confirmed the impossible. The P-47 Thunderbolt had taken everything Germany's finest fighters could throw at it and still survived. By July 1943, American pilots were beginning to uncover the true strengths of the Thunderbolt. Lieutenant Colonel Hubert Simk, commander of the 56th Fighter Group, had discovered through painful trial and error what others would soon embrace. Don't turn with them. Don't climb with them at low altitude. Use your weight. Use your power. Use your guns. The massive weight of the Thunderbolt, initially thought a disadvantage, became a deadly asset. In a dive, nothing could catch it. From 30,000 feet, a P-47 could reach 550 miles per hour faster than any German fighter could follow. Even in a steep vertical dive, that speed could then be converted back into altitude during a zoom climb, leaving pursuing Luftwaffe aircraft hopelessly behind. Captain Walker Bud Mahurin, soon to become one of America's first European theater aces, perfected what became known as the boom and zoom tacticlo. Among pilots, it earned the nickname the Thunderbolt turkey shoot. Rather than engage in turning dogfights, P-47 formations climbed a high altitude, 30,000 feet or more above the effective ceiling of most German aircraft. When enemy fighters appeared below, the Thunderbolts would roll inverted, dive at incredible speed, and unleash their full firepower at the bottom of the dive. The Germans stood little chance. Deflection shooting was nearly impossible at those speeds, and when the American guns opened up, it was like hitting a wall of lead. Pilots who survived described entire aircraft vanishing in a cloud of debris. These weren't kills, they were vaporized. The full potential of American firepower became clear during the dual bombing raids on Schweinfurt and Regensburg. On August 17, 1943, the deepest penetration into Germany. To date, it was a test of the P-47's limits, range, endurance, and effectiveness. Major David Schilling, leading the 62nd Fighter Squadron, spotted a formation of twin-engine Messerschmitt Bf-1010 destroyer aircraft maneuvering to intercept the B-17SA. The Bf-110, heavily armed with rockets and cannons, was a dedicated bomber killer but slow and clumsy in a dogfight. Schillings for Thunderbolts dove from 28,000 feet. Gunnar Endrich wrote aboard one of the German aircraft, later recounted in a POW interrogation, "The American fighters came down like hammers from heaven. I opened fire at 800 meters, good hits. I saw them strike the fighter's wing. The P-47 didn't even wobble. Then he fired. The aircraft ahead of us just came apart. Not shot, down destroyed. The wings separated, the tails severed, the crew torn to shreds. It became nothing in 2 seconds. In under a minute, 8 Bf-110s and Bf-109s were annihilated. The Germans had never seen anything like it. Each P-47 carried 425 rounds, per gun 3,400 rounds, total nearly 900 pounds of ammunition. At convergence range about 300 yards. All 8 guns' ballistic paths overlapped in a 6-foot-wide kill zone. Anything inside that sphere was hit by over 100 projectiles per second, each traveling at nearly 2,900 feet per second. The ammunition was a testament to U.S. industrial might, a carefully engineered mix of armor-piercing incendiary tracer, and standard ball rounds, designed not just to kill, but to ignite. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabigobreski, who would become America's top-scoring ace in the European theater with 28 kills, summed it up: when you hit them with all 8, they don't just go down, they explode. I saw a 109 cut clean in half. The tail fell one way, the nose another. The pilot never knew what hit him. By September 1943, German pilots were facing a new nightmare. The P-47's performance increased with altitude just as German performance dropped off, thanks to its turbosupercharged R-28 engine. The Thunderbolt maintained full power up to 30,000 feet and beyond. In contrast, German fighters with single or two-stage mechanical superchargers lost effectiveness above 25,000 feet. Oberleutnant Hans Philipp, one of Germany's most revered aces, with 206 victories, encountered this brutal truth on October 8, 1943. Leading JG-1 against AB-17 formation at 28,000 feet over Bremen. Phillips FW-190A6 was sluggish and choking in the thin air. Its BMW 801 engine, powerful at medium altitudes, was now gasping. Then came the Thunderbolts. Diving from 32,000 feet, P-47s of the 56th Fighter Group struck with devastating force. Robert Johnson, now a seasoned combat pilot and nearing ace status, spotted Phillips' distinctive FW-190 with ornate nose art. His report was matter-of-fact. Opened fire at 300 yards. 30 deflection. Observed strikes along entire fuselage. Enemy aircraft exploded. No parachute seen. Phillips' death rocked the Luftwaffe. A man with over 500 combat mission survivor of both Eastern and Western fronts had fallen in seconds. The German High Command demanded a report. What they received in November 1943 was chilling. The Thunderbolt had a service ceiling of over 42,000 feet beyond the reach of any Luftwaffe aircraft. It approached transonic speeds and dives. It featured 3 8-inch steel behind the pilot, 1 half-inch armored windshields, and an armored engine housing. Most alarming, it could absorb enough damage to destroy 3 conventional fighters and still return home. In January 1944, Hauptmann Heinz Nokov Jagions, a veteran of over 200 missions, encountered the new P-47 variant during a February 1944 interception near Hanover. In his combat diary, he wrote, "The fat American fighters have learned to climb. We bounced a formation near Hanover, expecting the usual advantage. They turned into us and climbed with us. When we tried to disengage, they followed us up to 30,000 feet. Schmidt was caught and blown apart. Nothing left but smoke and fragments. These are not the same machines we laughed at last year." The paddle blade propeller did more than improve performance, it changed the P-47 sound. The blade tips approached supersonic speed, creating a thunderous roar audible from miles away. German ground troops began recognizing Thunderbolts by sound alone. A deep, ominous rumble they came to call Donnerschlag, the thunderclap. By March 1944, P-47s, equipped with drop tanks, could escort bombers deep into the Reich. Standard loadout included 108-gallon wing tanks, or a 75-gallon belly tank, extending range beyond 1,000 miles, and thanks to the paddle blade prop, Thunderbolts could jettison their tanks and immediately engage enemy fighters on equal footing. Luftwaffe commanders, seeing the writing on the wall, began shifting tactics, no longer targeting the P-47SA, but trying desperately to break through and destroy the bombers before the Thunderbolts could intervene. The hunters had become the hunted. Flying through a P-47 escort screen had become an increasingly suicidal task. German pilots developed a grudging respect bordering on fear for the large American fighter. Major Raoul, one of Germany's topasses, with 275 confirmed victories mostly on the Eastern Front, barely survived a March 6, 1944 encounter with Thunderbolts that left him seriously wounded. In a post-war interview, he recalled, "We saw them above us, fat silhouettes, against the sun. Someone laughed and said, 'Here come the flying pigs.' Nobody was laughing 30 seconds later. They came down like an avalanche, faster than we could react. The first pass destroyed 3 of our fighters just gone, transformed into flaming wreckage. Their guns didn't fire in bursts like ours. They unleashed solid streams of fire. Getting caught in that stream meant instant death. These escort missions revealed another critical advantage of the P-47. While German fighters had to run their engines at high power draining fuel rapidly, Thunderbolt S, massive radial engine, cruised efficiently at altitude. P-47s could remain with bomber formations for hours, rotating coverage and still retaining enough fuel for combat and return. And when P-51 Mustangs began arriving in spring 1944 to take over the long-range escort role, P-47s shifted their focus to the ground attack role where they would become the most feared aircraft in the German arsenal. That transition began in earnest in April 1944 as Allied forces prepared for the invasion of France. The Thunderbolt's machine gun battery, already proven devastating in the air, was just as lethal on the ground. Its standard armor-piercing incendiary rounds could pierce the top armor of most German vehicles, and the sheer volume of fire could destroy soft targets in seconds. A 2-second burst delivered 160 half-inch projectiles into an area the size of a truck. But what truly transformed the P-47 into a multi-role juggernaut was its ordnance. Oberst Ansbon Luck, commander of the 125th Panzergrenadier Regiment during the Normandy campaign, described P-47 ground attacks with visceral clarity. They came in solo, you could see the pilots' faces. The sound was terrifying. Engines roaring, rockets screaming. Then came the hammer of those machine guns. A column of our trucks simply ceased to exist. 20 vehicles reduced to burning wreckage in one pass. The psychological effect was devastating. We called them Jabos fighter bombers, but these were beyond that. They were flying artillery with sniper accuracy. On June 6, 1944 to date, the Luftwaffe discovered how completely the balance of air power had shifted. Over 500 P-47s blanketed the beaches, forming an impenetrable canopy over the Allied landings. German fighters that attempted to break through were annihilated. Oberleutnant Wolfgang Fischer of JG-2, one of only 3 German pilots to reach the beaches that day, later reported, "The sky belonged to the Americans." Thunderbolts were stacked from sea level to 30,000 feet. We tried to break through at Dondwell fighters from our grup. I was the only one to return. The P-47s were waiting at every altitude. You couldn't climb over them, couldn't dive under them. Their guns turned our fighters into aluminum rain. In the weeks following D-Day, P-47s unleashed systematic destruction on German movement during daylight hours. The statistics were staggering. In June 1944, alone, 9th Air Force Thunderbolts claimed destruction of 651 locomotives, 3,847 trucks, 512 tanks and armored vehicles, and 4,553 horse-drawn wagons. The Wehrmacht was forced to operate exclusively at night, crippling its ability to respond to Allied advances. Desperate, the Germans tried everything to counter the Thunderbolt, reinforcing armor, increasing anti-aircraft guns, developing camouflage. Nothing worked. The P-47's mix of speed, durability, and sheer firepower made it nearly unstoppable. Even the feared 88mm flak guns struggled to track the fast-moving Thunderbolts flying low and fast. While it devastated Europe, the Thunderbolt was proving equally invaluable in the Pacific. The 348th Fighter Group, operating from New Guinea, found that the P-47's strengths were ideally suited to the vast distances and brutal conditions of the Pacific Theater. Colonel Neil Kirby, commander of the 348th, developed tactics tailored to the region's unique challenges. On October 11, 1943, Kirby led 4 Thunderbolts against 40 Japanese fighters over Wewak. He shot down 6 aircraft himself in a single sword, earning the Medal of Honor. Japanese pilots, accustomed to agile but fragile opponents like the P-40 or F-4F, were wholly unprepared for the Thunderbolt's power and survivability. Ace pilot Sabuto Sakai, who fought P-47s over New Guinea, later wrote, "We called them monsters. Our 20mm cannon, which could destroy a P-40 na Feiwitz, had no effect. I put dozens of rounds into one Thunderbolt and watched it fly away. Their return fire was terrifying streams of heavy bullets that shredded aircraft in seconds. The P-47N, developed specifically for the Pacific Theater, featured enlarged wet wings capable of holding 93 gallons of fuel, each extending its range to 2,350 miles. This transformed the once short-legged fighter of 1943 into a true long-range escort capable of accompanying B-29 superfortresses all the way to Japan. Perhaps the ultimate validation of the Thunderbolt's evolution came in its clashes with the revolutionary German jet fighter, the Messerschmitt Meadow 162. With a top speed of 540 miles per hour, the jet should have been untouchable by any propeller-driven aircraft. But Thunderbolt pilots discovered two vulnerabilities. During takeoff and landing, when the jets were slowest, and in high-speed dives from altitude, on November 27, 1944, Lieutenant Colonel John C. By early 1945, a specialized variant of the P-47M entered service, designed specifically to counter German jets and V-1 flying bombs, with water methanol injection boosting its Pratt & Whitney R280 engine to 2,800 horsepower and refined aerodynamics. The P-47M could reach 470 miles per hour at 30,000 feet, fast enough to intercept jets under the right conditions. Major George Bostwick, commanding the 63rd Fighter Squadron, shot down to meet the 62s in March 1945. His tactical report emphasized the advantage of firepower over speed. The jets are faster, but they can't turn, and they can't take punishment. One good burst from our guns, and they come apart like paper. They have to slow down to attack bombers. That's when we get them. The ultimate proof of American industrial superiority came on January 1st, 1945. During Operation Bodenplatte, Germany's last-ditch air offensive against Allied airfields in Belgium and the Netherlands, nearly 900 German fighters, many flown by elite veterans, launched surprise attacks on forward airbase at Y-34 airfield near Metz, home of the 365th Fighter Group. The initial strike succeeded. 22 Thunderbolts and several other aircraft were destroyed on the ground. A captured German pilot, brought to the command post, pointed smugly at the burning wreckage and asked, "What do you think of that?" Major George Brooking's reply became legendary across the 9th Air Force. He simply pointed to the ground crews, already clearing debris and readying hard stands for new aircraft. "By tomorrow, we'll have 40 more. How long will it take you to replace your pilots?" The German pilot's smirk disappeared. Within 48 hours, brand new P-47 D-40s had replaced the losses flown in directly from depots in England. Germany, on the other hand, lost 271 aircraft and 230 inexperienced pilots during Bodenplatte, many of them irreplaceable instructors and squadron leaders. Those were losses the Luftwaffe would never recover from. The Americans lost 134 aircraft total across all affected airfields, replaced everyone within a week. The numbers told a story of inevitable defeat. Republic Aviation produced 15,683 P-47 Thunderbolts during the war, more than any other American fighter. At peak capacity, the Farmingdale plant on Long Island completed one Thunderbolt every hour, 24 hours a day. The Evansville, Indiana, plant built from scratch in 1942 was producing 500 aircraft per month by 1944. Each P-47D required 65,000 individual parts, 8 miles of wiring, 2,000 pounds of aluminum, and 300 pounds of rubber. The engine alone had 2,400 components machined to tolerances of 1,000th of an inch. Yet these machines were assembled with astonishing precision by American workers, many of them women who had never seen an airplane before Pearl Harbor. Ammunition production was no less staggering. Each Thunderbolt sortie required 3,400 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition. With hundreds of P-47s flying daily, fuel demand was equally enormous. Each Thunderbolt burned 100 gallons per hour in cruise and up to 300 gallons in combat with water injection. The 9th Air Force alone consumed over 25 million gallons of aviation fuel monthly by late 1944, all of it shipped across the Atlantic in tankers, themselves products of American mass production. Even more impressive than the machines was the training system behind them. By 1944, the United States was graduating 30,000 pilots annually from advanced training, more than Germany had trained during the entire war. Each P-47 pilot completed a minimum of 400 flight hours before seeing combat, including 100 hours in fighters. By contrast, German pilots were entering combat with fewer than 100 hours total by war's end. The difference showed in the air. American pilots arrived in Europe, trained in formation, flying, gunnery, navigation, and combat tactics. They had practiced deflection shooting on towed targets, studied gun camera film, and even trained against captured German aircraft. They knew their machines intimately, having read technical manuals most German pilots never saw. Lieutenant Eugene Roberts, who arrived in England in September 1944, embodied this advantage. I had 420 hours in my logbook, including 75 in the P-47. I'd fired on towed targets, practiced deflection shooting, studied gun camera film from real combat. On my first mission, I knew exactly what to do. The German pilot I faced didn't have half my experience. It wasn't even a fair fight. In March 1945, Oberstleutnant Josef Pips Prüllertha, same ace who had once mocked the Thunderbolt as a pregnant cow, was interviewed by German propaganda officials for a morale-boosting publication. His response, deemed demoralizing for print, revealed how utterly the perception had changed. The Thunderbolt is the best fighter bomber ever built. Its firepower is unmatched. The guns never jam, never overheat, never run dry. It carries bombs like a medium bomber, launches rockets like artillery, and turns like a fighter when needed. But more than the machine, it represents something bigger: unlimited American production. Talos at 10, they build 20. We lose one, and he's gone forever. Their pilots arrive better trained than our instructors. They have fuel for practice, ammo for drills, parts for everything. We have nothing but courage, and courage without resources is just delayed defeat. We laughed at them in 1943. We're not laughing now. When you hear those guns, you know death is coming. That sound, it haunts us. Mechanical, precise, unstoppable. They didn't outfly us. They overwhelmed us with steel, fire, and the certainty of endless reinforcements. By April 1945, the Luftwaffe existed more on paper than in the skies. Severe fuel shortages grounded most aircraft. The majority of veteran pilots were either dead or captured. Airfields had become cratered ruins. But even if the Luftwaffe had aircraft and fuel, German pilots faced an impossible equation. To take off meant facing swarms of P-47 Thunderbolts that dominated the air from ground level to 40,000 feet. Feldwebel Klaus Brettstender, one of the last German pilots trained in 1945, flew only a single combat mission before the war ended. His encounter with Thunderbolts over Leipzig lasted 12 seconds. I saw them diving from above 4 Thunderbolts in perfect formation. I tried to turn, but they were too fast. The leader fired from 500 meters. My aircraft shook like it had been hit by sledgehammers. The engine exploded. The wing tore off. I barely escaped. In my parachute, I watched them obliterate my entire flight. 6 fighters destroyed in under a minute. The sky rained, burning aluminum and body parts. The psychological impact was complete. German airmen developed what Luftwaffe medical officers called Jabo fever, fighter bomber fever. Physical symptoms of extreme stress, triggered simply by reports of Thunderbolt presence. Veterans who had fought Spitfires and Hurricanes without hesitation became physically ill before flying missions, where P-47s were known to operate. Ground troops panicked at the distinctive roar of incoming Thunderbolts, knowing that survival depended on finding cover immediately. The final statistics of the P-47's wartime service almost defy belief. In the European theater alone, 3,752 enemy aircraft destroyed in aerial combat, minus 3,315 aircraft destroyed on the ground, minus 86,000. Railway cars destroyed, minus 9,000 locomotives. Destroyed to 6,000 armored vehicles. Destroyed, minus 68,000 trucks. Destroyed, minus 60,000 horse-drawn vehicles. Eliminated in the Pacific Theater. Thunderbolts recorded. Minus 697 Japanese aircraft destroyed in aerial combat 150 on Tigron. 1,500 vehicles destroyed. 150 locomotives eliminated, and countless barges. ships, and installations obliterated the 9th Air Force alone, primarily equipped with P-47 Seaflu. 873 combat sorties. They dropped 120,000 tons of bombs, fired 135 million rounds of ammunition, and launched 60,000 rockets. Behind these numbers lay staggering human costs. The Luftwaffe lost an estimated 28,000 pilots to Western Allied action. Many of those fell to the P-47's concentrated machine gun fire. Each German loss represented years of training that couldn't bear. By war's end, the average Luftwaffe fighter pilot had under 30 hours of combat experience. By contrast, the average P-47 pilot had over 200. Captured intelligence documents from the Luftwaffe's interrogation center at Oberursel revealed their evolving assessment of the P-47 throughout the war. The report on the Thunderbolt changed drastically. April 1943. Large, unmaneuverable fighter. Inferior to German types in all performance areas except dive speed. Machine gun armament inadequate. Assessment. Minimal threat. December 1943. Excellent high-altitude performance. Extreme structural strength. Firepower. Increasingly problematic. Pilots using better tactics. Assessment. Significant threat. Above 25,000 feet. June 1944. Dominant fighter bomber. Superior to all German types above 20,000 feet. Devastating firepower against all targets. Extremely difficult to shoot down. Assessment. Critical threat. At all altitudes. March 1945. Best fighter bomber of the war. Firepower, survivability, and performance unmatched. Pilot quality exceptional. Assessment. Direct engagement not survivable in 19. At a reunion in Phoenix, Arizona, former American and German fighter pilots met in peace. Among them was General Lieutenant Adolf Galland, former commander of the Luftwaffe's fighter force. Asked his opinion of the P-47. His video-recorded response captured the complete arc of German perception. We made a terrible mistake in 1943. We saw this big, heavy fighter and laughed. The Americans don't understand air combat, we said. They built a bomber and called it a fighter. But we were the ones who didn't understand. The Americans didn't build the European still fighter. They built an American one designed around production, survivability, and firepower. In a war of attrition, the aircraft that can absorb punishment and deliver destruction will win. And they were right. The first time I flew a captured P-47 after the war, I understood. The power was astonishing. It climbed like it was falling upward. The cockpit was spacious, the visibility excellent, the controls precise. It was a pilot's airplane wrapped in armor. But what impressed me most was realizing they built over 15,000 of them while fighting a two-ocean war. Each one had an engine more complex than anything we made ends. They built them faster than we could build our simple machines. That's when I knew we never had a chance. We called their guns Roosevelt's piano because of the rhythm. Once you heard it, you never forgot. Many of my friends heard it for the last time. The P-47 didn't just defeat the Luftwaffe. It destroyed it. The Thunderbolt's design embodied American philosophy, brute force engineering backed by unlimited production. Every part was overbuilt, overpowered, over-engineered, unstoppable.